Right, folks. Well, thanks again for joining us for a Tuesday night training with the CSRD. Tonight we have a special guest joining us, John Quilty. He's a Salmon firefighter and a member of our Structure Protection Unit team with the CSRD. I believe Tom Hansen is also on the call, and you may remember from last week, Tom was delivering the presentation on the emergency program. He's our emergency program coordinator, and he helps oversee the structure protection team that we have and the 3 structure protection units that we have. So John's got a lot of experience in this. Our team, just for a little bit of background on the team, we do have about 25 members of our local fire departments, and that's all of the CSRD departments, Salmon Arm, and Sicamous, and those members have been trained to basically work with the structure protection unit in wildfire situations, and they get deployed around the province. And John today is going to talk a little bit about what happens out there and a little bit about the team itself. So without further ado, John, turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks. That's great, Sean. Just going to do a screen share here so everyone can see what I'm up to. Just tell me as we go if you can see this. How's that? Can you see that okay?
All good.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to move a few things around. So if you don't mind, just hold in the questions till I get to kind of a spot where we can do some questions. That'd be great. So my name's John. I'm a structure protection unit member from the CSRD and the Salmon Arm Department. And I want to show you some of the neat things that we've been doing over the last maybe 8 to 10 years. I've been in it a little bit longer. So without too much introduction, here's just a quick picture to show you what we got up to in about 2017. It was the 100-mile fire. We were asked to go and do structure protection and tender operations on the mill that's right in 100 Mile. There's actually 2 of them, and you'll see some things as we go that we learned from it. So I've got some contributions from Jake Jacobson, Mike Engholm, and Carmen Gaidos in this presentation. Oh, just going to do something here. Just be patient. Let's see here. There we go. So a structure protection crew. What is it? Well, it really is a 5-person crew with structural and wildland training and experience. Can be either a group that's brought together with say the CSRD or a municipality. Sometimes it's a fire department, and sometimes it's a private crew that comes in. So typically we've got 2 crew cab trucks. We've got a water supply of some kind that we access. We've got a variety of sprinklers, lots of hose. Oops, sorry, getting some feedback. We've got a lot of Mark III pumps. Typically, they're the standard pump on most of the operations that we do, and a variety of different kinds of fuel, radios, tools. So our team, we've got a lot of members, as Sean said. We've got probably in excess of 25 people, and it really starts with great leadership. And I think we've got that. We've got Derek Sutherland, Sean, Tom Hansen, and Kathy at the helm, and they're supporting us big time in terms of the financial side, the planning, the responses, buying gear and equipment, and stocking us with not only great uniforms, great gear, but great attitude. So also we have a variety of instructors. We've got people like Jake Jacobson. I'm sure a lot of you have met Jake. He's a fixture in terms of wildland firefighting in the region. We've got Mike Engholm, myself, Carmen Gaidos, Mike Pickle, Mark Sikowski, another strong leader. And we also have tons of members from all over the CSRD. So myself, I sort of came into it about 21 years ago. I started working in the Salmon Arm Department. It's a lot of Tuesday nights, as I imagine lots of you have felt. I think I'm well over probably 1,200 Tuesday nights, and tend to not miss too many of them. But I really love the wildfire fighting. I've been to a number of interesting deployments. I've been to the Bobby Burns Heliskiing Lodge down in around the small little locale of Parsons near Golden. Been to Pritchard, Falklands, Spence's Bridge, Grand Forks, Christina Lake, 100 Mile House, Williams Lake. I've done some deployments in the Salmon Arm Zone, mostly as staging managers or just helping deliver goods. Worked at the RAP base for a few summers. So where do structure protection units work? Well, within the Salmon Arm Zone and the CSRD catchment areas, we work to put out any kind of wildland urban interface fires in our zone or protect our structures, but we also get deployed. We get deployed to a variety of fires within the province. Here's an example right on your screen right now of the Bobby Burns Heliskiing Lodge. That's a fancy $10 million lodge we were asked to protect back in 2014, and it's about 52 kilometers back on the dustiest road you could imagine. It's an incredible heliskiing lodge, and also summer time they tend to have a lot of people that do hiking and outdoor activities. So just a beautiful spot to go. When does a structure protection unit get called to the wildfire? Usually in the days or the hours leading up to some kind of event that might take out a town. You can see a picture of a nice structure that used to be in Rock Creek. So this is a fire that was back in 2015. We went past it. Some of our crews had worked it in a different capacity, but we were on our way to Christina Lake. And this picture is a good reminder to me, and I think anyone that saw it, that sometimes you wonder why fires happen. If you look at this picture, you'll see that there's green grass all the way around, nice clear opening, and yet that structure is gone. So typically there's a hurry up attitude to call the structure protection unit crews. We get deployed sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes late in the day, and we're in a hurry to get there, and then we hurry up and wait once we get there. Sure if you can see this. I've got on my screen something I'm just going to hide. So you can see a couple of interesting fires that I've been to in the last number of years include the 100 Mile or the Gustafson Lake fire. It was known as C40621. It was about 5,700 hectares. So if you're wondering how big a hectare is, that's about 100 meters by 100 meters. So it's a pretty good sized fire. I went on a crew from the CSRD. I went on the Ranchero Deep Creek tender. We also had the Anglemont Fire Department's tender there. We had 2 3-person crews, and our job was to support and protect a large mill. Actually, there was 2 mills we worked on, the West Fraser Mill and the Norbord OSB plant. And our second job was to do things like fire watch for the sawmill, and we often would go into the town site just to make sure that we knew the locales. Also worked on the Hanceville Risky Creek fire. It was a big fire, about 239,000 hectares. And that was the Williams Lake evacuation that we were at. That was a great fire to be at as well. Very interesting. Okay, there's a bit of a gap in the slide advancement, so just be patient if it's too slow for you. There we go. Okay, so just check your volume. I've got a neat little video here. I put together some of the footage, obviously not professional quality, but I want you to think about some of the things that you see in this little video that I've got. It's about 5 minutes. It's all about preparing for a backburn. So our 2 trucks that were on it and a number of crews, we were sent in to protect a log house, and it was kind of in the way or the path of the wildfire, and definitely a backburn that was going to be made. So I want you to think about the distance that you're going to see in this, the distance to shuttle water, the kind of noise that was involved, the types of apparatus that were on the scene, the kind of air support and hazards. And I want you to watch for things like the porta tanks and the setups of pumps and gear and sprinklers. So here we go. One of my favorite helicopters in the background there, it's called Whiskey Whiskey Lima. If you've been in the Salmon Arm zone or region here, you probably recognize this helicopter. So I'm just wondering, Sean, if you can give me some feedback on whether that sound is coming through okay before I advance more.
We didn't hear any sound on that one, John.
Okay, so I'm just going to back something up for a minute here. So just tell me quickly.
Yeah, that's good.
Is that okay?
Put me on the list for state.
SDS 109, is that, just to confirm, is that to help out Tender 6 area? No, on the other side of the highway with Tender 11 Ferndale, over. Tender 11 copies.
Another one coming right behind. I wonder.
Tender 11. SDS 109. Go for Tender 11. Okay, I'm pulled over, got my sheet here. Anyways, Tender 9 is on 103 East Road, patrolling, checking on the bladder. They should all be focused on running. Just hang around there and do technical reporting there. Look them up, look them up. Tender 11 copies.
Two tenders in there right now. That's it. Well, let's see. Waterdale. Maybe Waterdale, no Waterdale. Yep, yep. Gotta stop.
Okay, so just a few different interesting parts in that video. I think we were amazed when we showed up on that scene to see how many helicopters were cycling over top of us, trying to wet down the bush and the landscape around that log house. So you'll see later on why they were wetting it down so profusely, and quite an incredible scene for any of us that showed up. Those helicopters were running probably in, I want to say, 1 to 2 minute cycles, 4 of them for about 2 hours straight, and just couldn't imagine how incredible they are in terms of pilots and the expense of that activity. So the Wildfire Act is pretty important to think about. It gives governments the ability to carry out fire control. So you can actually go look this up if you want to learn more about it. But the Wildfire Act of 2005 says that the government can enter onto land, any land, and carry out fire control if an official considers that a fire on or near the land endangers life or threatens forest land or grassland. And at the request of a local government, the government may enter on land and carry out fire control within the local government's boundaries or jurisdiction. So that gives local governments the ability to go on land if they think structures are threatened in any way. Why is the CSRD positioned well for a structure response? Well, we've got, like I said before, key personnel in decision-making processes. We've got people that can look after the finances, logistics, communicate with the Office of the Fire Commissioner. We have a well-established EOC. We've got 3 trailers that are quite incredible. I'm sure a lot of people have seen them now. Our members are trained, well identified, got nice uniforms that are great in terms of working all day long and in tough conditions. We've got members with a variety of experiences. And I mean, I'm just lucky enough to do the presentation today, but I would have to say that the people that we've got throughout the CSRD and the Salmon Arm Fire Department are absolutely incredible. The different kinds of skills that we've got, the people that have all sorts of things to offer. And you never know what you have to offer until you get put in a situation where you're part of a team. So we've got strong support from the CSRD. We've got a very good reputation with the Office of the Fire Commissioner. So how do you become one? How do you become involved? Well, show some interest. Start talking to Sean or Tom. You can talk to your fire chief within your hall, other members. But typically you need to be a member of a paid on-call fire department. You have to have taken the S100 wildland course, and typically that's a 2-day course. Sometimes it's a little bit less, but it's usually 2. There's a course, sometimes you see it listed as SPP 115 or S115. That's the Urban Interface Structure Protection course. You also have to take the S185 Fire Entrapment Avoidance Safety course. Obviously, you need basic first aid, and you'd want to connect with either the CSRD or Salmon Arm Fire Department, or perhaps even get some experience with a contract crew. And there's a variety of them within the province. You have to be available for deployment, usually within the summer season, but often we have other things that we get involved in terms of training. So structure protection units are contracted or hired, basically brought in by the Office of the Fire Commissioner. They're under the control of the Incident Command for the fire. And the Union of BC Municipalities works with the BC Wildfire Service, and the Office of the Fire Commissioner to provide structural protection units. Within BC, there's a governance structure, and it's sometimes nice just to have a quick peek at it, just to see how everyone's connected and see where the resources come from. So we all know about the Wildfire Service. Used to be long ago the Ministry of Forests, and they're actually under the Ministry of Flynn Rowe, and it might even have a slight change from that now, but it's basically the Forest Lands, Natural Resource Operations, and Rural Development. And they've got a variety of different resources that they've got at their disposal. Now they've got things like unit crews. You've probably seen unit crews, and they have a variety of sizes. You see big and tall, and skinny, small, anything you could imagine in terms of workers. They tend to have groups anywhere from 5 to 20. Usually you see 20 groups called 20 packs. Initial attack crews, sometimes you see them working on fires, and they might be a 3-person crew that are out of a zone. Rap attack, Tom's a good example of that. We're very, very lucky to have Tom working with us. Tom's got lots of years experience as a rap crew member, and they're the members that rappel down out of the helicopters, or they come out of the helicopters in crews of 3. And Tom can give us a little bit more update if needed, but I would think that we've got, I think, 20 crews. Maybe it was less than that. Maybe it's 10 in our zone. We have para attack, and that's crews that jump out of a perfectly good airplane. They'll land right in the fire zones, and I can't remember if they were 20s or more, but typically about 20. And then you'll see to the left of that, I've got contract crews, and contract crews are groups that work all over the province, and they come in for some of the bigger fires when resources are thin, and they do very similar jobs to the unit crews. Emergency Management BC, they're the ones that direct the Office of the Fire Commissioner, and they send out people called structure protection specialists. And they tend to be people that are retired fire chiefs or people of significant experience in the province, and they go and they'll run one of these incidents from our point of view. And we're actually under the Shuswap Emergency Program, CSRD Fire Services, and then we've got the SPU, or the Structure Protection Unit team. BC Wildfire Service, they've got alternate resources, so they can call in contract crews, like I said before, crews like you'll hear Valhalla, Boulder Mountain, strategic fires out of Cranbrook. They can bring in out of province crews. You sometimes see Ontario, Quebec, Alberta, lots of Alberta crews, even New Zealand, Australia, I think has been here. We've got emergency firefighting crews that can come in, and they can be hired. Less likely to see them on a bigger fire or fires that are of significance. They're short term. They might help out in the zone. And then we've got within our group, the Office of the Fire Commissioner sends out their crews under the direction of a specialist. And so we're under that kind of chain of command. Okay, I just want to take a moment here, or a minute or two, give you a chance if you want to ask any questions, myself or Tom. I'm sure Darnell, Mike, if he's out there, Mike Engholm, and a few others would be happy to answer specific questions.
Are there any questions out there for John right now?
Yeah, John, I got a question for you here.
Okay, yep.
So my name is Jeff. I'm new to the area. I joined the Swansea Point Fire Department out here.
Okay, great.
I come from Prince George, fire hall called Pineview.
Okay, great. Yeah.
I've been deployed, I think it was about 3 years ago, to the Fraser Lake fires.
Yeah.
I ran a tender out there.
Oh, fantastic.
I have my WSP 115 pump, WSPP 115 structure, as you were just saying.
Yeah.
And WSP WFF1 train the trainer.
Fantastic.
So I'm wondering what else I would need, and then would that be contact with you, contact with my own chief, just to get more information and like join your guys' training? And
I think it'd be great to kind of follow the chain of command up. So go with your fire chief to start with. We'd
Okay.
love to have you on board, and then copy or CC an email to Sean and Tom. Those are kind of the people that we work with directly. And once COVID settles down a little bit, or once we get a chance, we're hoping to kind of keep our crews going and do some training. But we'd love to have all sorts of different people, and that sounds like you're a perfect candidate.
so do you guys train on like a certain night of the week? Is it once a month? Is it like 2 months before fire season, you guys kind of get together a few times, or how does that work?
Well, typically we've gotten together on a weekend, usually in spring. And as things get closer to the fire season, we all get a little bit edgy and jumpy and jittery, especially Darnell. We just sort of connect, we talk to each other, but you just could not predict when the fires are going to call us out. But typically we have something in the spring, and we welcome all different members, because you know, you can imagine within your fire hall, there's all sorts of people with great skills. And I think of the number of times that I've hosted or been part of a teaching session. One of the first things I like to do is just put people on the hot seat, and I pick 5 people out and ask them a question like, what good are you to us? And every single person that I ever pick out, they have tons of talents. They've got tons of skills, and they're useful. So typically you got to pick a team and with teammates that are just strong, and let them do what they're good at. You know, some people are good at pumps, some people aren't. Some people are great at planning and listing things. We need those too.
Yeah, when I got deployed, they gave us 8 hours notice before we had to be at the truck to get going.
Yeah, that's often the way it is. You hurry up,
Yeah.
and then you hurry up and wait once you get there.
Yep.
That's
Absolutely.
a lot more than most get, actually.
Yeah.
Most of the time I get a call from the OFC and they have to be out there ASAP. So yeah,
Yeah,
definitely
sure.
pretty normal.
Okay, so
Jeff,
this is
Jeff, just one question. Did you say you're a trainer of S115?
I'm just looking at my, so WSPP, WFF1, train the trainer. I completed that 2020 January.
All right, we should talk.
so I don't know if anyone else has a question they want to get out before we go on. Kind of right here is an interesting little picture I took. It was a fire that was in Falkland. Can't remember how many years ago, but there's Ken Mount right in front of us. He's just right in on the action, and there was a TV crew interviewing the incident commander on that fire. So it was quite an interesting little fire. Could have been bigger. You'll see some pictures of it. Okay. All good to move on. Any other questions we can catch a little later on here even? So I want to go over some of the concepts in the first level of structure protection training that we have. So we've got 4 levels, and this would cover kind of our first level. So if you're interested, typically some of our crew members would go out to your fire hall, and we'd have, say, a structure protection trailer and just give you an orientation to the trailer and the process. So who are we? You'll see our famous Jake on the right there pointing to our green bulletin. So we're a team made up of CSRD and Salmon Arm Fire Department members. We receive specific training to operate a structure protection unit. We work under the authority of the CSRD and are part of the Shuswap emergency program. We're a specialized deployment team that may travel outside the CSRD by request of the Office of the Fire Commissioner. What do we do? Well, we respond to wildland fires that threaten homes, not only in our own area. I mean, that's the biggest objective that we have in terms of the trailers, is to respond and have those trailers ready and organized so that we can go to events within our own zone. But also we can deploy those CSRD structure protection trailers to other zones. We can get called out by the Office of the Fire Commissioner, and there's a real benefit in lots of ways, not only in training, but financially for our group. We've got triage assessments that we do. We pre-plan, we check out houses like the one you can see in the background there. Darnell's trying to get in my picture again. He always seems to do that. But that house we had to protect. There was a fire probably a good 1.5 kilometers over the hill in the background there. We had to protect that structure and a number of others on a street. So we typically do a triage assessment. We pre-plan, we check out every place and decide what we would do and whether we can do anything. So we devise an action plan, we establish a water curtain. Sometimes we're providing public education on fire safing homes. We talk to homeowners a lot. And even on occasion, as has been the case for the last few years, we do flood assessments and get involved in other incidents. What we don't do, we typically don't want to put ourselves or others at risk. We don't provide initial attack teams, so we're not really set up to be teams that are specialized to go in and work on incidents, bigger incidents. We like to stay within our given tasks and our skill set. We're not cutting down trees typically. Sometimes we can on occasion cut down parts or pieces if they're, say, 6 inches or less, but we're not really out there to drop trees. I mean, you can imagine if I showed up at your house, your yard, anywhere out in the CSRD, North Shuswap or anywhere, and I thought your trees were too close to the house and I dropped them, you might be really happy with me during the wildfire season, but as the fall comes along, you might say, ooh, those were my favorite trees, and you're going to have to replace them at whatever it is, 10 grand each. So we don't cut down trees. We don't remove trees unless they're for our own safety. And we don't initiate evacuations. So we don't go along and just tell people, hey, get out of here, out you go, head to Kamloops. That's done by a different group. So deployment within the CSRD boundaries, events will be attended by trained fire department members. So we can use any of the crews within the CSRD to work with our trailers in the CSRD. And typically, if there's an incident in your catchment area, we would want to let you do the initial or first response capabilities and then backfill with some of our crews that are from outside of your zone to help support you on structure protection. And if we're going outside of the CSRD, that's under the direction of the Office of the Fire Commissioner. So we're talking about deployments within our zone and what we have. We've got 3 of these 20-foot trailers. They're absolutely incredible, well stocked. They've got Mark III pumps. They used to have a couple of other types of pumps, the BB4, and I can't remember what the other one was. Oh, the Striker maybe. Now I believe we've got 4 Mark III pumps, and they're precious little items. They're worth about 5 or 6 grand each. They're incredible.
6 of them now, John.
6 of them per trailer?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Yeah, they're absolutely incredible. And part of that video, I was asking you just to listen for noise. And one of the noises you hear is kind of a loud sound, and that's from the Mark III pumps. So they're pretty incredible pumps. They can run all day long and just push lots of water towards whatever you need it to have water on. So we've got lots of sprinklers, different kinds, 2 main kinds, kind of a medium and a larger sprinkler. We've got 1,500 and 2,500 gallon relay tanks. Can't remember how many we have, but usually we have about 1 of each of those in there. Tons of hose. We've got VHF radios, GMRS radios. If you're not sure of those are those little handheld radios you can buy at Costco and Canadian Tire that you can talk to each other down at the lake with, and while you're out biking. We've got a chainsaw, ladder, tools, and theoretically those trailers can protect maybe 25 to 50 structures, but personally I'm not a real big supporter of that concept because I think you're most often limited by your relay tanks. So in terms of some of the inside gear, you can check them out. Maybe you've seen them already. On the right-hand side is a Mark III pump. It's a Wajax classic all over North America, probably around the world in lots of different locales. Great pump, works well. It's finicky to get started. You just got to make sure it's primed, check a few other items on it. You should practice on it if you get a chance. There's a trailer in the background. You can see the different kinds of sprinkler heads we've got. And I guess if I can give you one quick little piece of advice when you're setting up sprinklers on a wildfire urban interface zone, make sure that you loop them. Think about keeping them as one big loop rather than a branch. If you loop them, the pressure is a little bit better. So operational plan, the basics. What would you do if you were on a structure protection team? Before your deployment, you get a briefing. We go down and visit Sean and Tom and Kathy, and we get some paperwork and sign some forms and get kind of a briefing about where we're going to go and who we've got to see. In the early sort of first few years of doing it, we were a little bit unsure in some parts of the process. Radio communications is a bit of a challenge for us. We were told we were going to be on certain channels, and we didn't have all the channels we needed, but I think we're all pretty good about that now. We've got great resources. And on scene, the team meets the assigned SPU specialist. We seem to know a few of them now. We've been on a number of deployments. We go over safety parameters, including the fire behavior and evacuation routes, because wildfires are way more exciting than our structural fires. I've been to a number of structural fires over the years, and salmon arm, I don't know how many now, but I find wildfires way more interesting because there's that element of nature that, you know, pushes the smoke, pushes the fire. There's slope, there's heat. It's just way more difficult. Whereas, you know, most of the fires we go, they're structural fires. We got them contained within the first 5 minutes. We develop an action plan, come up with a plan of which areas are going to be protected. We don't typically do that. We might do that in talking to the specialist, but that's usually developed as a bigger plan for the fire. And assignments are issued, which means we get given a section of road, a piece of maybe a subdivision or protecting a certain structure. It might surprise you at times the kind of houses or the kind of buildings we protect. You might have the nicest house in your neighborhood, but if it's poorly situated, if it's right in that wildfire zone, we might not be protecting it. And as you saw in that mill, and you're going to see a little more of it shortly, in some communities, we look at the values, and for 100 Mile, we were protecting the sawmill because it was our #1 priority for saving. And you would think, well, why not the school? Why not the grocery store? Well, if that mill goes down, the town's down as well, or it's dead. So priorities are definitely an important part of the decision-making process. Everything's within the incident command system. We report in regularly, and we've got people that check in on us regularly. So we got 4 levels for training within the CSRD. We've got that first level where we come out, maybe do a little bit of a display at your fire hall and get you to get accustomed to the equipment so that if we get a fire in your zone, then you know, we can work together and get you helping us set up zones. Level 2 is that entry level. You've got your S100, maybe you got your 115 course, and then you might have some training that we put on just to get you familiar with our gear, equipment, and people. And then level 3 is for those interested in and maybe able to go on deployments in the summer. It doesn't happen every summer, but we have gone to a number of them. And then level 4 is kind of a level that's a little more specialized, and it's for the team leaders, and it involves lots of paperwork, filling out triplicate forms, and just making sure that you have some of the skills so that we can keep the team flowing nicely. Okay, so outside of our group, sorry, did anyone have a question? Okay, nope, we'll keep going then until the next break. In terms of a bigger picture, what do we see on big fires or fires that are more significant? We see a different kind of trailer. And the first time you see one of these trailers, you're kind of in awe. It's basically a semi-trailer. I don't know what size that would be, whether it's 53 foot or whatever size it would be, but quite incredible. They're well stocked. They have a series of Mark III pumps. They've got lots of different kind of hose, as you can see. They've got bins full of sprinklers. They've got jerry cans, hard suction. They've got tool kits, ladders, hand tools, hardware for attaching sprinklers to buildings. You can see some of the other bits and pieces. They've got some safety gear, VHF tools, water thieves, and wise. So those are pretty important little pieces of fire gear, forestry gear. So a water thief is a kind of a cylinder that has a 5/8 hose connection coming out of it. And the Y is just a diverter of sorts. It has 3 ports, and there's a handle on it. It allows you to divert water. And so that's kind of nice, sort of like a shut off, but it's not truly a shut off. Pulaski is that piece of equipment that you would call maybe a grub hoe. And it looks like an axe with a pick part to the other end. So quite interesting. You can see Darnell's in my picture again. When you know it, I would have had a lot more gear there shown, but he got in the way. And Darnell was actually a pretty incredible member on this deployment when we were down in Grand Forks. And I just remember one of the skills that he was quite good at was inventory. And that's a task that is a good example of within your crew, there's probably people that are very detail oriented, and Darnell was great. He inventoried all our gear. And as you could imagine, when you take out gear in a hurry, you have to demobilize. You have to put away all the gear at the very end, and everything has to be inventoried back. So we've got these type 2 trailers. You've seen them maybe. They've changed over the years, and they typically on a fire would go out, and they have something called a standby rate or an open rate. And those are just fancy ways of saying big money and even bigger money. So I looked up today kind of a standby rate, and I couldn't tell you whether this is accurate or not. I think it's pretty close, but the standby rate for our trailers when they're staged at an incident is about $3,500, almost $3,600 a day. And once they're opened up, once those doors open and gear comes out, the rate goes to about $8,300 a day. So we do sometimes benefit as a group, and some would say, well, why is the CSRD making money or other groups making money? Well, there's probably $120,000 worth of gear in those trailers, so it just helps offset it a bit. So lots of interesting equipment, tools, 1.5 and 2.5 inch hose, and there's mostly forestry connections on quick quarter turn. Once you get to a bigger fire, there's often a zone office and kind of a warehousing area, or an area where they've got excess equipment. And here's what we saw the first day we went down on the Grand Forks fire, Christina Lake fire. We just came across just pallets full of gear. If you could imagine, there's pallets of pumps, and there was probably, I don't know, I'm going to say 15 or 20 pumps on each pallet, or maybe more. I couldn't tell you. There was, on that fire alone, there was probably 50 or 60 pumps that I saw, and they all have serial numbers. They all had to be accounted for. On your left-hand side of the screen, you'll see relay bags or porta tanks of sorts. There's 1,500 and 2,500 gallon tanks. There's hoses galore. You got big, huge crates of hoses. You couldn't have enough hoses on some of the fires, and they have to be requisitioned or ordered kind of the day or so before. They take time to come in from warehousing areas like Chilliwack. So when we come into some of these fires, one of the first things that kind of we had to do, or we have to do, is kind of work with the people that are organizing things locally. And you can imagine everyone shows up and they all want to have their pumps and they want to put them out on the fire. And one of the biggest rate determining steps is just setting up things like fuel. If you go into a place like Grand Forks and you say, okay, great, we've got 50 or 60 wildfire pumps ready to go. Your biggest challenge will be, do you have the fuel ready? Is it delivered? Is it mixed, pre-mixed with the right ratio? And that's what we ended up doing the first morning we were there at that fire. So we have to protect our resources. You can't just give any amount of equipment gear out. You have to kind of prioritize and put the equipment out where it's needed. And often the zones become overwhelmed. I worked with Jake Jacobson from Salmon Arm, our wildfire trainer in the area here. And for many years, he worked up at the RAP base up at their warehouse. And he was probably the most incredible person I've ever seen to deploy gear to crews. He'd have 100 people in front of him on some of the days when crews were ready to get going. And often by the end of it, he'd have given them a minimal amount or an amount to get them going. And he's quite a good resource. So think about the people that are on your team and see what their skills are. So often when we go to a fire, like on this one, this is the Falkland fire, probably a couple 100 yards into the bush behind this residence. Family had just moved in a week before, and there they were sitting, looking at this nice fire up above them. And they kept asking us, well, when should we leave? And we've got trigger points. So we learn and talk about trigger points where fires move to certain locations. Then we have to kick in parts and pieces of plans. So we communicate with homeowners. We plan escape routes, and we try and work with others. Here's day 2 of being at the fire in Grand Forks. Obviously, we work in areas that have heavy smoke. Some days you can work in a fire and you think that it's 8 or 9 or 10 at night, or maybe later, and it's actually midday. There's so much smoke. So We definitely deal with heavy smoke, and I call it alternate radio communications because you can never seem to have the perfect radio comms. Someone have a question? Okay, sorry, I'll keep going. So visibility is limited. We had to learn, and we, continually learn wildfire protocols. They're different from how we deal with radios in the structural fire departments. For each location, we size up and use triage forms. And you can see in the background there's a form, and basically just asks us a bunch of questions about the location. We put the address, we rank it or we rate it depending on how well we can protect that zone. We draw pictures. We list any kind of hazards. You'll see a few hazards in the next few slides. And we make this document that becomes a planning document and a legal document. So later on, if a house was burnt down, people may have to answer to questions like, why didn't you protect that building? And so it allows us to plan and to prioritize which structures we're going to protect. And it identifies hazards as well, which is really important for us on the ground, and even allows us to pass off information to other crews that are showing up later on. Because typically we work no more than about 14 days in a row, and then we have to take some time off. Okay, so here's a structure. You've seen one picture, two parts of it, two different sides of it before. What would you do if you came up to this one? You're on a crew of 5, maybe there's only 3 of you at this particular house, and your structure protection specialist says, protect it. What would you protect? Do you think it's worth protecting that home alone? Or should you protect this nice workshop right here with some missing siding? How about a little shed way back in the background there that has some 4-wheelers in it? Would you protect that? Would you protect their dump truck that's sitting up in the trees? Well, the answer is you protect it all, because anything that doesn't get protected, typically the government is charged the cost of it later on. So you have to think about the resources you're going to need. You got to think about water resources is probably the most critical, as we know in this region. When you have any kind of fire, you got to get your water tenders going. You've got to get trucks that are under contract to bring in water on wildfires. You got to draw up a plan, make some notes, and delegate, and you got to get on it quick. So a place like that, you might have 15, 20 minutes, maybe half an hour at the most to protect the whole property. Anyone have any questions on this one? Okay, we'll keep going. This is down in Grand Forks in Christina Lake. We had a pretty good crew. We had Mark Zakowski, Darnell, myself, Scott Davies, and I think we had Mike. I can't remember Mike's last name, and we'll come up with it here as a group. But we got pretty good at protecting buildings. We got some, I guess, good compliments from the structure protection specialist. We could set up and protect some of the structures within about 15 minutes. We'd have everything you see, everything on the house, all protected, ready to go, even with the pump fired up and tested. So right there you see a porta tank. That's a 1,500-gallon tank. Right next to it is a pump on the ground. It's got the hard suction laying there. It's been tested, fuel's ready to go. And then on that property, there's a circuit or a zone of sprinklers protecting the entire structure. So we attach sprinklers. Typically, we put them up on the peaks, get a few of them going, the larger rotating sprinklers, and we try and get them to provide a water curtain. You're really protecting these homes from about a 15 or 20-minute exposure, maybe even less than that. And you have to think about where the embers or the ember storm can hit the buildings. So we try to make a water curtain. We improvise. We use whatever they've got to attach to the homes. If we've got some chunks of 2x4, bits of wood, we're pretty creative sometimes with what we use, depending on what we come across. So we have to protect everything. Everything in that zone we got to protect, like I said before, otherwise the province could end up buying it. come on places, and sometimes we don't have the right materials or equipment, and we have to improvise. This is kind of an interesting one that one of our crew members, I won't say his name right now, but did a great job making us a ladder. And he was quite careful up on that peak, but we protected this set of buildings. They had about 2 or 3 outbuildings as well, and quite a challenging place to protect. It was on its own, long driveway, no water resources, and we protected it within a short period of time. It was quite a risky one down near Christina Lake. You can have a look at this and think about what we're doing here. We used someone's pool, and great source of water. Can't think how many of that might be. Maybe, oh, I don't know, 2,500 gallons there, if that. And great source of water while the fire is in the area. And what happens on these fires is once the crews leave, the wildfire service, they get a bill, usually from the homeowners. And they did on the one fire I was at. Later on, they got a bill for some of the pool water that was used up to protect the homes. So people are usually quite happy that you're there while you're there and while the fire's there, but after things are gone, then they have a good look around, and sometimes the costs are charged to the wildfire service. Important piece of information in this picture, you see a placard, this white piece of plastic material with the address of the building, and we've got a serial number, and we've got a pump set, we've got all the pieces of gear and equipment and who put it there. That's the SPC 38. That was the crew, that was our crew that put it up. That's so that the crews that are shutting everything down and demobilizing know what to look for. And in case the pump is stolen, they've also got the serial number there. That does happen apparently on some of the fires. Now, we didn't come across it on any of our pumps, but I know in the Grand Forks area, some of the pumps were stolen. Ember storms are usually the biggest hazard for structures, something to think about in your own area, your own yard. This was an ember that I found on the Grand Forks fire, and this was about 3 kilometers away from the fire. It was sitting out in the middle of someone's yard. So wildfire season of 2017 was a ripping good fire season. Lots of interesting crews, lots of interesting deployments. But interestingly enough, it was a wet spring, heavy snowpack that year. It was predicted to be an above average fire season. The province allocates about $65 million per year for firefighting. And in that summer, there was in excess of $550 million spent. It was an above average year with about 1,300 fires, 1.2 million hectares burned. And in the Caribou Fire Center alone, up in Williams Lake, 100 Mile, that region, about 871,000 hectares burned, so massive fires. So we had crews, some of the crews worked doing truck or tender operations. We had other crews, Mike Hangholm and I think Brett and Carmen and a few others were doing a lot of different deployments that summer. They were going to, we were at the Gustafson Lake, they were also there, Hansville, Risky Creek, and the Elephant Hill fire. So those were big fires, lots of skills, lots of work, long days, and our crews performed just amazing. So we got to learn lots of good things about wildfire fighting. We got food and accommodations wherever we could find it. Our first day that we rolled into 100 Mile, we got the very last little bits of the food at the fire camp. You can see our crew up in the top left. There's Jim, Kara, Randy, Mike, Darnell, and myself. We had 2 trucks on that fire. And we stayed initially in the arena one night, and then 6 nights on the floor of the curling rink. The first day or so, we had our own food, and then people started bringing us food. We also could go up and get food at various times at the fire camp. So here's our sleeping accommodations the first night. They were expecting a lot of people and a lot of fire crews to be stationed there. And we ended up being one of maybe 3 fire trucks, 3 groups there. So we slept in that arena on the floor, kind of hot and dry and noisy, but it was a good place to sleep first night. but we sleep anywhere we can. Gymnasiums, sometimes we stay in hotels or motels, tents, wherever we can to get some sleep. That 100-mile fire was a pretty big fire, not massive really compared to those other ones, but it had 30-degree temperatures for weeks on end. If you look at the number of millimeters or centimeters of precipitation, almost nothing. For the whole month of June and July, there was 1.5 centimeters of moisture that fell. And so that region has typically some pretty dry forests. They've got Douglas fir, lodgepole pine, spruce, and subalpine fir. There's a lot of beetle kill that was in the zone where they had the fire. Dense forests, lots of ladder fuels, and mild sloped topography, good access to water, lots of little lakes. There's my favorite helicopter. You saw that in the video earlier. So they actually did a back burn, and to save the mills and the town, but mostly the mills, they had the idea that they were going to create this back burn, a blackened zone where the fire would perhaps come up to a space that they had burnt out and logged, and it would protect the town once the fire dropped down into that zone. So they created something called a back burn, deliberately lit fires. They had helicopters that were dropping some kind of a mixture. I'm not sure. Tom will tell us, I'm sure, what it was. It was is some kind of propellant that comes out of big 55-gallon drums that they're hanging on the helicopters and flying around, and they're fanning the air. But they had, and you'll hear it in my little video, they had a group called an ignition sector getting ready to burn. Now that's why you saw the water being dropped so profusely on that cabin or around the cabin. They were trying to protect that cabin before they were going to burn around it. So they had helicopters, 3 of them that were doing the burning, 1 bird dog plane coordinating 5 skimmers or air tractors. There was the Whiskey Lima, this blue one right here, Bell 214, I believe. They had some Wildcats. Those are the 3 that you saw that were the red and white ones. They were 212s or 214s, and then a whole bunch of other helicopters and equipment moving as well. So just to set up this little video, this is about 4 minutes. We're getting towards the end of the slideshow, and we'll have a bit of questions, but what do you think? Would you think it's a good idea in second week of July, up in a forested area with beetle kill, dry ground, dry bush, light a back burn within a kilometer maybe of this mill? So here we go. My helmet off. It's moving in a perfect direction. It's coming up slope. We're looking at about 2 o'clock. Starting to see some plumes of smoke. We're hoping that the fire moves further into the fire line, burning out the fuel. And the plume is coming this way a bit, which means the wind is pushing it this way, so be ready.
Whiskey Lima, it's Telco. Go ahead. How much fuel do you have left on board?
So we're hanging out in the log pile right next to the West Fraser Mill, and we're hoping we can have the wind move the fire away from us. But if it causes an issue, we've got Darnell on the monitor, and we've got 1,600 gallons ready to fight the fire.
Air, Helco.
as you can see, the fire's really starting to go. It's a back burn. Hopefully it's going to create a nice black zone to stop the fire.
Telco, you
Telco, CAN.
CAN at Telco.
This will be my last one. I'll be in for fuel, and I'll go set that.
Copy that, thanks. And Bird Dog 129 at Telco 621.
Telco 621, Bird Dog 129.
Yeah, you can check. We're just hovering over the large mill. It's the West Fraser Mill. It's about a mile just to the northwest of the airstrip, 100-mile airport. Let us know when you have visual of the Blue Bay Star.
Okay, looking for you.
Well, we're about an hour into the burn. They've burned about...
I just have to switch to repeater real quick for a check-in. But the lake coming up ahead of us, that's a big lake.
3/4 of the back burn behind the mill have been completed. They're using helicopters with a drip torch. Looks like at least one, maybe 2 helicopters or one guiding it. Huge plume going a few thousand feet into the air, maybe 10,000 feet, I'm guessing. There's trucks near us. We're one of about 3 fire-related apparatus right in the mill zone, as far as I know. Looks like things are burning well now. There's a good wind. Wind is coming from the west of the mill site here, northwest. Seems to be moving towards the east. Hot fire. Massive fire. Seems to be doing very well. They're now going to have bucketing going on, or not, a little bit of skimmer action to build or reinforce their guard. The interesting thing about this last part of the video is that the entire burn lasted for about 2 hours, including the skimmer action at the end. Quite an impressive 4-kilometer wide by half a kilometer deep back burn. Okay, so that was that operation of backburn. It worked really well. Like I said, towards the end of that video, it was about 4 kilometers wide, half a kilometer deep. We had a lot of different jobs over that week or so that we were there. We did night watch on the mill. We were delivering water. We did property checks. We were just driving around, making sure that resources were ready to go. So a variety of jobs that we did. We went about a week later or so as a different group. We had one crew, maybe more. We had a structure protection crew that went up there. So as part of that, we had 2 trucks. We had the Anglemont, I guess you call it a duty chief truck, and the, can't remember if I was driving or I had the Swansea Point one, it might have been. But our crews were out and about. We were stationed right at the curling rink, and that was a big fire, 239,000 hectares, lots of different trucks, fire trucks, crews, equipment all over the place. It was an evacuation. Military was in town, police were all over the place. It was quite an incredible experience. So we got daily briefings in the curling rink. I'm not sure how many people have been part of this kind of a operation or deployment, but it's pretty incredible. They bring in people with kind of higher level command experience out of places like Surrey, Maple Ridge, Vancouver, and they have jobs where they organize a variety of crews. So what you see in the background there are crews that are mostly truck crews, so engines and tenders, and they were sent out every day to go and cruise all around the Williams Lake area and kind of north of Williams Lake, putting out spot fires, delivering water, and kind of fire smarting homes. Bottom picture there, you'll see tents, Tent City. That's for some of the fire crews that were there, and those are mostly the wildfire crews, the unit crews. They were stationed at the airport. And that airport, actually, just a few weeks before, maybe not even that amount of time, it had a wildfire that came in, and it sort of impinged on some of the resources and some of the buildings that they had on the edge of the airport. So lots of different crews. You'll see all sorts of different cities, towns, municipalities there represented. We even worked with different kinds of equipment. There were trailers like the one you see there in front of you, a structure protection trailer that was out of Alberta. And that would have been a very expensive trailer to rent out, but there was all sorts of gear and equipment used in that region for probably, I would think, a good month and a half. And we were lucky enough to have generous companies nearby. They were, quite supportive of crews, and you'll see that. And you want to make sure that you never take advantage of that. But definitely some of the people in the town were very thankful and very supportive. We went into a logging contractor one of the days that we were there, and we asked if we could, use some of their equipment or materials. We didn't have for the Ranchero Deep Creek truck, the tender, we didn't have the downspout or the spout for letting the water kind of drop down into the porta tanks. We had a bit of a challenge, so we actually made one. We went to a logging company and they gave us a big piece of culvert, and they were quite receptive to having us there. Lots of different fire trucks, all sorts of gear and equipment, and lots of different skills. Some people had never used drafting. Some people didn't know how to draft with their fire trucks out of ponds or creeks or streams. And, they were mostly the companies or the engine groups from bigger cities. But lots of different skills, and people learned lots from those fires, definitely. Helicopters, lots of dangerous activity being around helicopters, as you saw in my first video. Here's one that Carmen Guidos took, just a short one, looking at helicopters, what they do when they're getting their water. So they show up, they might be around the lake, anywhere on Shuswap Lake at any time, filling up.
Give golf and Tippy on there, Chris. Just a heads up, there is an extreme wind warning for today. Feels like it's starting to touch down now, so.
So those of you that are new to wildland firefighting, you might not know this, but wildfires tend to create their own weather patterns, and they create winds that are just incredible. On some of the deployments we go to, sometimes you hear trees dropping in the forest, and just the extreme wind, the dry temperatures, it's just amazing what wildfires can do. So on the Elephant Hill fire, the crews that we had, they were out working with other crews from New Zealand that were doing backburns, and they hadn't done backburns extensively, but they kind of learned it during that deployment. But we don't do that. It's not something that we would do. We don't light fires. We don't get involved in any kind of drip torch activity, but it is a common occurrence you see on some of these fires. Some of these pictures are good to think about. Wildfires are way more dangerous, and they have lots of hazards, not just while the fire's approaching, not just during the time when the fire's there, but in the time after the fire, the day or two afterwards. You can get some really dangerous conditions, whether it's pits or holes that are sinkholes with ash in them, or embers, could be danger trees. There's a variety of hazards that you see in any zone. And wildfires, they burn houses. These are pictures that Carmen Guidos took, and I think Mike and Carmen, and I'm not sure who else was on that particular crew, but they were chased out by some of the fires that were up in the Risky Creek area, and kind of, I don't know if this was 108 Mile. We'll maybe hear from them if Mike is available at some point here at the end. But they caused some pretty hazardous conditions. You can see this nice propane tank at about 4 o'clock on our horizon here, just obviously overheated, but it seems to be good. Don't know if it just vented or not. You can see all the metal roofing. You can see the hazards around from that alone. And sometimes fires, they'll chase people out. You can look at the picture on the left. You see a nice aquatic zone or a nice marshy area, and then there's a burnt out house in the background. To your right, you'll see what happens when anything that's maybe aluminum, it melts typically in the wildfires. lots of the homes, they catch fire, not because necessarily a tree drops on it or fire comes up in terms of grass, but often it's just an ember storm that gets the house. It goes in under the decks or into openings and starts a little fire. One of the things we've learned many a time is that we have to protect our pumps. You'll see this nice little dock that a crew, I don't know if it was one of our crews, put the pump out on, and luckily the pump survived, but the dock didn't do so well. So lots of different environments, lots of places where you have cabins. We can be sent out anytime during the summer, and maybe even in early season as well. So it requires that we have strong leadership, good people. That's a critical part. You've got to have people that get along. You got to talk things through, and you've got to use the skills of your crew. Here's that Bobby Burns Heli-Skiing Lodge. This was one of my first deployments. I learned a little bit from it in that you don't just go gung-ho and start setting up. We were in this fire zone because of a fire that would be maybe 2 to 3 kilometers back to your right on the horizon. It was coming in. This was a one-way valley. You couldn't get out if the fire came down the valley. Helicopters were there, and the guests were helicoptered out at about 9 or 10 every morning. And then we were allowed to come out and walk on the grounds. We weren't supposed to be out during the day. The company didn't want to have to refund the guests at the time, the $5,000 per week that they were paying to be hikers. So we had to pre-plan this structure, and all we had was a single trailer and limited resources. Right in front of you, you can see kind of a path or a trench. There was a small little creek and a pond, a feature-like pond that we dammed up, and we expanded quite significantly. But have a look at the hazards we were protecting against. There were 3 Jet A fuel silos, a 90,000 liter propane tank with another larger size tank, maybe even I don't know what size that would be, maybe a few thousand liter tank in behind it. There was diesel, heavy forest right up near it, wood, timber construction, timber frame, and lots of firewood. So luckily we actually didn't have to put out any of the gear or equipment, but we had to drive the road probably every day to check on the fire. We weren't actually allowed to stay there. We had to stay down in Parsons, so about 50 kilometers away. The Stickpin wildfire back in 2015, Christina Lake, Grand Forks was a big fire. Lots of crews. Our crew was there, structure protection crew. They thought it was going to come running over the border. They were going to open up the border to the American town that was just across the line from Grand Forks. And luckily the wind shifted lightly, but it was a big fire, sustained winds of about 150 kilometers an hour. It was going to perhaps take out Christina Lake and Grand Forks, and fire behaviorists said that it was an erratic fire. So in that one, we had to go around, we had to set up as quick as we could. That's a house that we protected in about 15 minutes. We got on the roof, put up some big sprinklers. We got the pumps accessing water in the pool, protected outbuildings, and that one was actually pretty good. We actually didn't have any fire that came through on that one, so we were good on all the structures in that town. So that's the last of them. I hope I haven't worn you out with too many pictures today, but there's a picture in the foreground of crews, gear, equipment. There's the Anglemont fire truck, and I think that's the Swansea command truck. I drove that a few times. Great truck as well. Lots of other gear, equipment, people, lots to learn, and we learn every time we go. So thank you. There's some of our crew on a training exercise, but there's lots of great people in our group, and we welcome everyone. Thank you.
Thanks very much, John.
You're welcome.
Are there any questions for John that came from the presentation?
Yeah. So I think in response to someone's question earlier, you said we go through our fire chief to get involved directly, or do we contact you?
No, not me. I would say go up the chain of command. So go with your fire chief. I guess in Salmon Arm we have hall captains, and then we go to our fire chief. But I think you have fire chiefs, and then you would go up to have conversations to Sean, and then also Tom. But I'm sure Sean, you might have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, typically, so as John had pointed out, the qualifications to be a member of this team are you have to have your SPP 115 along with your 185, your 100. So if you've got the training, that makes you eligible. And then typically what we do, we try to keep the list down around 25. So when we have openings, we like to have we like to have a waiting list and people who are interested in the team. And then really it's about, trying to select the right fit for that team. It is, like we said, it's something that, you're expected to go out provincially. Now, that being said, this is also training that I really encourage every member of every fire department, whether or not you're looking to go on a provincial deployment and join the SEP team. I'd encourage you to get all of that training as well. We need to be able to do this work if wildfires threaten our communities as well. And if you have this training, it's much more likely we can, if something were to happen in your own area, of course, you'd be a part of that response, just being a member of the fire department. But even elsewhere within the CSRD, it's good to have multiple resources that, although you might not be on a provincial deployment team, you could definitely get experience around our regional district if you have the appropriate training.
John,
Yes.
the 185, do we offer that? Do you offer
185 is actually included in Jake Jacobson's course. He actually has created the S100 course that includes the 185. It is a very small it's a short, I think, 4-hour course typically, and he was able to bring it right into the course, and so everyone who's taken it through Jake has that.
What do you mean, Jake? Didn't hear that, did you?
Are there any other questions?
I think Don had a question.
Yeah, question for John there on that Bobby Burns lodge. Why couldn't anybody stay there overnight? The fire department, or from the sounds of what you said, the customers got to come back, but you guys had to leave.
Yeah, gee, I sure wanted to stay there because they had gourmet chefs, they had nice accommodations. We were traveling up on a 52-kilometer powder puff flour textured road. It was just horrible. But they just they didn't have the space for us, they said. I would have been happy to sleep on someone's floor, I'm sure, on that one. That was a pretty nice place. They just they didn't want to alarm the customers that were there. And so they had a contingency plan of evacuating the staff and the guests. And so they just were sticking to their plan of when they got to their trigger point, when the fire would hit a certain location, then they'd have to evacuate, but it was going to be all by helicopter. There was only one road in, but it was a really neat deployment to go to.
Okay. Also, on that mill fire, did you guys have water at the mill to fill those tanks up, or did you have to shuttle it back and forth from someplace?
We actually did have water. You may have seen in my first little video, my crappy quality video at the start with the fire truck where Randy and Darnell were, there was some kind of a standpipe of sorts, but I think the water was from a well. So I don't know if they had a well and cistern sort of system. We were just taking water from there or down in the town sites. So pretty limited water and big area to protect. Like that was a pretty important structure for us to have to protect. Not to mention the one just down to the west of that, the Norboard plant was huge, and they had lots of timber and log supply in their yard. They were protecting that zone.
Thank you.
Any more questions for John? Okay, if not hearing any, I'm a little bit beyond that. I just wanted to mention that not only do our structure protection teams often get called for assistance in wildfire situations around the province, we also do receive calls from the Office of the Fire Commissioner for assistance with apparatus, and that's where you saw some of our apparatus out there as well. Not a part of the structure protection unit necessarily, but they were out there kind of doing their own, as apparatus teams, also helping to protect structures and helping to extinguish fires in different areas. And that's something that we do deploy to as well. And to do that, typically what we're looking at is people who are available at the drop of a hat, able to go out, and your basic training of minimum exterior operations being completed. And we do need a team leader on every truck as well. So I'm always looking for people, last minute, making calls around, and typically it's to go with a specific apparatus that's going out, but that's another opportunity that you would have to get involved in provincial activities. I know Tom Hansen is on the call as well. Tom, was there anything you had to add?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to mention, I think Sean or John did a really good job with the presentation. There was a few things. I think he asked some questions. If anyone wants any more detail, I can certainly provide it. I'd encourage you also, if you're interested in any of this stuff, to learn more about the crews working together with BC Wildfire Service and structural fire. There is a wealth of information on the BC Wildfire webpage, and you can just go in and look up crews, numbers, equipment, resources, structure protection units. They talk about the type ones that John showed pictures of, the big trailers, and the sort of a capacity, something like they estimate 70 to 90 homes protected. But again, that's dependent on the complexity of each site. And there's 6 of those in the province. And the province actually only has their own, I think it's only one type 2 that's owned by the province. They have an urban unit, and then there's the rest. They rely on contractors, and that includes local governments like the CSRD. So, we become a contractor to the province when we allow our SPU unit trailers to go out there and cruise. And I think they estimate around 43 type 2 trailers in the province that they sort of have relationships with, and they figured at least another 20 or so that they don't have on the books for signing up, but they estimate there's at least that many more out there in the province owned by various local governments that could be utilized in an emergency. But they do depend a lot on local governments for those resources. And again, as these guys said very well, the structure protection team relies a lot on the fire departments themselves to do all that base training. People like the one fellow that was on the call earlier, coming in with previous training, including a lot of folks that are in the CSRD right now that have crossover, some of them from wildfire training in their past, that kind of thing too. And so those are all the qualities we're looking for when we're sort of looking for new recruitment for the team. And before I forget about it too, I wanted to make sure throw a plug out with everyone on the call here. If you haven't already heard me pushing the Fire Smart message, it's a really big part of everything John said in there. He mentioned multiple times the fire and the ember storm. And I would really encourage you guys to take that one to heart yourselves, even in your own home. If you haven't already looked at your own property and home and asked yourself, in a wildfire situation in our area, would my home be at risk? And if you don't know much about Fire Smart in the program, I'd encourage you to get sort of educated on it, and encourage those that might be interested and have a little bit of free time to consider even being a local Fire Smart representative, which is sort of somebody who's got the basic training and can do assessments and work with the CSRD to continue to promote and educate the public, the residents, do assessments on homes, your own property included. But that's a very, very valuable program, and it's tied really well into this structure protection because, as I just mentioned, there's only so many resources, structure protection resources in the province. And as you guys know, same with the fire engines and everything, when a big event, one of these large wildfires happen and you have those massive ember storms that a lot of you have seen on the videos from places like Fort Mac or, around the world, actually, Australia, California, Paradise, these big fires that cause disasters. A lot of those could have been reduced or eliminated in many cases just by following the Fire Smart, FireWise programs. If people would have done the work beforehand, clean up and remove all the combustibles and stuff around their homes or properties, that's really going to make the difference between a disaster or not. So again, I do want to throw that plug out there. What else did I see here? There was, I was going to mention too, John had a couple of good pictures there. If you are out there doing structure protection and setting up sprinklers and water systems, it's really important to also consider water damage. They really like to highlight in the courses too and discuss with people, you're trying to protect it against fire, but in some cases they've had structure protection setups, sprinkler systems that have actually caused water damage to the structure. So it wasn't the fire that damaged it, but it was all the water that was improperly set up and raining water into the side of the building and into the walls and into your structure and stuff. So you do have to consider things like that. And as John pointed out well, there's always folks after the fact that try to make claims against the province, which ultimately is all of us as taxpayers. So you want to sort of prevent damages if you can. What else?
Hey, Tom, I got a hand up here. Just let's see if we can get see what Cam had a question.
Absolutely.
Cam?
Hey, yeah, I was just actually wanting to touch on what Tom was just saying there. Like, why is it that, you know, like SPU goes out, tries their best to protect, you know, all the structures and items on the properties, you know, or even taking water out of a pool, and then the province gets a bill from the homeowners, you know, for the whatever buildings, you know, weren't saved, or for water taken out of a pool.
Yeah, I can address that. I mean, it's not in every case for sure. It's actually somewhat a small percentage ultimately that actually that kind of stuff happens. But you know, in some cases, I know I've got experience with, say, agriculture is a good example of certain farms. They might have limited water supply that's really critical to their livestock and that kind of thing. And the province actually has an active risk management section that deals just with those kind of cases. And they will try to be proactive. And anytime they have crews out working and identify things like fences they had to cut, all the crews are trained to take very meticulous notes that they had to, you know, break a lock, break a fence, you know, any damage that was occurring during equipment and operations. And when it comes to private property, so that when they get these bills after the fact, as you can imagine, some people aren't as sort of upfront as others, and they might claim that, oh, that was, you know, a brand new fence or something. But if you have really good notes and pictures, you can often sort of show that it was actually an old dilapidated fence that wasn't really worth more than $5. And so they have a whole section in government that kind of protects the province, I guess, against sort of incorrect assessments and risk. But there are cases where it's legitimate, and they'll try to make sort of plans ahead of time to say, look, this is, you know, under the Emergency Act, for instance, they can commandeer certain things, and that includes, in some cases, the resources like water. But the province is also fair because they recognize, look, if they're taking this person's water source and it's going to affect their livelihood, their livestock, they're more than willing to replace that and sort of fix it after the fact. And I think that's a fair assessment in those cases. And so again, it's not everybody, and in a lot of cases, people don't charge at all. They won't go after the province. You know, I still say it's the majority that don't assess damages. A good example, another one that sometimes happens though, is the air tankers. They're dropping retardant, and that red dye. If you ever seen a house covered in that, you can imagine the bill to try to clean that up. And so that's a common one that comes if they do have to drop retardant, and they get assessments for that if it's not covered by the homeowner insurance or something else. Again, the province expects that, and that is the cost of doing business sometimes. But they do try to minimize it through that risk management branch and their sort of claims. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much.
Let's see, I'm trying to see if I had anything else. Oh, you asked a question about aerial ignition at 1.2. I was just going to answer a few of those questions. So that's just for the aerial ignition platform. They have different ignition devices that are slung underneath various aircrafts, like helicopters, the most common one there. And it's just a gelling agent, something like Surefire, Lumigel, or Petrogel brand names that are mixed with gasoline or jet fuel in some cases. And then they have ignition devices that allow that to be dropped in a controlled manner from the helicopter to do quick ignitions for over large areas to cause a really effective burn when they have to use fire to fight fire. And so that's what John mentioned there. And that's quite a specialized sort of tool, and people who use those are well trained and have a lot of experience, as you can imagine, before you light something like that. What else was I going to mention? I think the crews, there was a question. I think you talked a little bit about crews in the province. Again, you can go to the websites and check them out. Actually, the Paratac program has 60 people, 20 in Mackenzie, 40 in Fort St. John. The RAPTAC program has anywhere from 10 to 12 crews, depending on the year and experience level and turnover. And then there's probably better than 30 unit crews in the province now. There is over 150 three-person IA crews around the province, spread throughout all the zones and things that work together. About 1,500 or so overall seasonal firefighters in the BC Wildfire Service that work with a lot of structural crews in every community. And that's a big part of like that cross training. The CSRD has a number of initiatives that are grants that we work on in the emergency program, protective services, and some of those include those cross training sort of events where we will have funds to help put on some of this training, like the S100, to offset some of the local costs, because it's being encouraged by the province to help local governments get more and more volunteer firefighters trained and other emergency volunteers to a minimum level of a lot of these things like ICS 100 or 185 S100, and then some other courses now they're coming out to do with Fire Smart, for instance. So that's great to take advantage of. And again, I think Sean said it well when he said our goal is to try to get as many people in the volunteer fire departments at least aware of structure protection, and then hopefully trained to that standard 115 it's available, and with support from the province that we can take advantage of. And then when it comes to that provincial deployment team, clearly there's not enough work every single year to have everyone out on provincial deployment, even though that'd be nice sometimes if you're one that likes to travel and get some adventure out there like John. But having that minimum sort of amount so far is what we've set a target for, to have sort of 4 to 6 team leaders and somewhere around 20 or so members on that team. And at any one time, hoping we can at least get, if we get a deployment, it's 5 people, so 1 team leader and 4 team members. And what happens typically is we get that call, as Sean said, it's usually 4:30 on a Friday. That's typical, right? End of the day or something, very quick, short notice, and they want people gone yesterday. So it's a really quick fan out phone call or email combination with us trying to track people down who can leave at a moment's notice. And really that's how, it's not us pushing that, it's the province. And so we often have very limited time to put a team together. So those that are, available on very short notice and quick and get back to us first come, first serve almost on that team are the ones that end up going. And then we kind of endeavor to communicate with the rest of the team that, hey, we had a deployment, situational awareness in case, you're sort of more heightened awareness, maybe available in case we get a second one. That's a bit more rare to have too, but not unheard of in those really busy seasons where they can't ever get enough resources. And I think, as Sean also said, I think they're either Sean and John together there, how important it is to have that training in-house, because clearly these things were purchased by the CSRD together with the municipalities' support and the training to really look after our Shuswap emergency program area, CSRD area, when it comes to A and B as well. And, that's where the priorities are. But of course, when we've been lucky the last few seasons with lower risks in our areas, then we want to take advantage of the potential cost recovery from and to help out obviously the province sending out these units. And I think the really big thing is getting our crews out and getting more experience, more training opportunities, so that they become a better resource if and when something happens locally. And like John said, I think we've had really good feedback from those structure protection specialists in the province. When our crews have gone out, they've been very well received and had sort of good feedback saying, great job, well done, professional, so we're very happy and proud of those folks that have gone out and represented us. And then they can pass that information on. They move up, as John said, into becoming team leaders and instructors for the other firefighters who are coming new into the structure protection program, and pass that information down. So yeah, it's kind of a neat one of the programs in there. And as Sean mentioned, it's not just the SPS, it's the engine crews as well. And, they had some similar incredible experiences up all around the north of the province there in the last few years, in 2017, 18, especially. See what else I had on here. Yeah, I think, actually, yeah, I'm just going to encourage folks again to as much as you can. I know you guys are already doing a great job this way, sort of liaising with your community members, your neighbors, your friends, all around the CSRD, and sort of spreading the fire prevention message from Fire Smart and all those areas that really help the emergency program. And I think it'll really show itself in the future if and when we get another large event or disaster in this area. We're really working hard, and with all your guys' support, to try to spread the message around fire preparedness, but also general emergency preparedness that includes things like neighborhood emergency programs that we talked a little bit about last call. So yeah, thanks very much for everyone's help and attention with all these sort of things, and your dedication to helping your communities.
Thanks, Tom. Are there any other questions before we call it a night?
I'll just say something real quick here, Sean.
Yeah, sure, Derek.
So you'll notice that our team is made up of Salmon Arm firefighters, CSRD firefighters, and District of Sicamous firefighters, and that's because our team, like John said, is a division of the Shuswap Emergency Program, and the city and the district are part of that Shuswap Emergency Program. It's just run through the CSRD. So one of the other things that we use this team for is flood response. And John alluded to that a little bit, and I just want to touch on a little bit more. These guys have been, and girls have been, instrumental in providing some ground truthing and initial response at site to help us out through provincial contracts. Most recently, the Salmon River flooding, they were really, really helpful in getting out there and getting the word out to residents and letting them know what we needed. And John, I just wanted to say thank you very much for joining us tonight and giving us a great presentation. I think there was lots of conversation stimulated out of this one.
Fantastic. Really appreciate the time and giving us the chance to present it. And I really wanted to say thanks to the firefighters that are all joined in tonight. I know it's tough to give up your time. There's not a lot of people that like volunteering their time anymore, but I really appreciate what you do in all the communities I visit in our area. So thanks very much.
Thank you again, John. Thanks. And yeah, thanks. And I definitely reiterate what Derek said there. Really appreciate you coming out and doing this for us. So for those of you who weren't on when we started, just to let you know, I am working on setting up an S115, the Structure Protection Unit training. No guarantee if we can get it going or not. We'll see if we can fit it into the spring calendar this time around. But there is also a possibility of having some spots open in a offering of that course that's local. It will be, if we do get any spots allocated to us, it will be on a first come, first serve basis. So I'm going to put it out to the chiefs. Chiefs, keep monitoring your email. Might be good to have an idea on who would be interested in a course like that so that you can get the answer in as soon as possible. Yeah, we'll keep going from there. But thank you all for joining us for another Tuesday evening training. I will be stopping the recording now, and you guys have a good night, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Sean.
Thanks, everyone.
Sure.